Hello, my friends out there in this universe of power. Welcome back to Titan Talk. This is Gabe, the one and the only Texas Titan. We have been off the air for a while, and I wish that had not been the case, but it was completely necessary for me to make that call. My mental health, honestly, has been struggling surrounding the whole realm of not being at World's Strongest Man 2023. And that time period has encompassed pretty much all of this year. Especially the past 6 months, even leading into December of last year. But my mental health has been suffering, and I've had to remove myself from social medias repeatedly, and that does work. It's a great strategy, but I have to get back on it too because I make a living off of using that as part of my business. But I'm back. I'm here. I'm recording the episode again. It's long past overdue. I need to give you guys a clue as to everything that has been happening. So I will touch on the World's Strongest Man stuff in a little while. I have actually tried to record this episode twice already. I even did a full-length version that was about an hour and 15 minutes long. But the way I feel about everything that's going on in my head is ever evolving, and I just simply didn't like any of those two recordings. This is the only ever episode of Titan Talk where it wasn't just one and done. And the last time I tried to record this was about 2 weeks ago. So I will try to keep it concise and to the point here. And of course, as always, if there's anything that you want to know more about, feel free to reach out to me. I always try to get back to as many of y'all's messages, comments as possible. And it is heartfelt to read that you care and that you support. But as for an immediate life update, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling healthy. I feel really good. I feel really strong. And that's great to say because looking back on the past couple years, especially even through last year and 2021 as well, I was plagued with injuries. None of those injuries are holding me back. My knees feel great. I feel really good. And that could possibly add to the frustration of, wow, I really wish I had been unleashed. Or it's another thing where I want to preserve that feeling good too. So I feel very healthy. I'm weighing a little bit lighter right now, about 295 to 300 pounds. And I have to say, it feels amazing. It feels amazing. Quality of life is so much better than walking around at 310, 320. So I firmly believe that I don't need to keep on that extra weight to stay strong. My numbers, lifting-wise, have not changed. That being said, when it comes time to doing some of the epic deadlift attempts and goals I have in store for this year, maybe I'll pack on a couple more pounds, but I feel really good right now, and I love it. And it's the capability that I have at this body weight compared to even just 10 pounds heavier. It makes me want to hold on to it. So I'm finding a lot of enjoyment in training again for the sake of fun, doing things that I enjoy, training for the sake of strength and health, not necessarily having any pressure to compete or pressure to train competitive events. I kind of shrugged all that off when it got close to about a month out of World's Strongest Man. And it feels really good to be doing it my way, vibing my way in the workouts. But as for where I will be next, I am recording this on the eve of Cinco de Mayo. Tomorrow is the Valley's Strongest Man and Woman over at Gentry Gym in Harlingen. And I don't know if you noticed, for those of you watching the video version, I've got a nice handlebar mustache going on. I've never had a handlebar mustache by itself without a beard. The mascot for Valley's Strongest is almost looks like El Mundo, Atlas, a Loteria card, a man holding the world on his back, but he's got a real rowdy handlebar mustache. And there was a point where I had done some traveling and I didn't shave much. I'm like, you know what? Instead of cutting it all off, let's grow it out and see how the mustache looks and wear it for Valley's Strongest Man and Woman. I don't know if I'm going to keep it around. I do know that I don't like it getting in the way of eating and drinking so much, and I might just trim it down a little bit and keep it nice and clean for a while. But regardless, I'm looking forward to seeing all over the Rio Grande Valley, Texas, and anyone who traveled the distance to be there at Gentry Gym for the Valley's Strongest Man and Woman. I will be there as the designated Strongman Corp chair for the South Texas region and a judge. It's going to be a badass day. I will also be commentating at the United States Strongman, the USS Nationals competition in June next month. I'll be a commentator there on the live stream. That's going to be fun. A national championships event. World's Strongest Latino in Portugal, mid-July. I'm still planning on being there. This is the first time there has ever been a world championship level event for Latinos exclusively, and it gives me a lot of pride to be there at that stage. So World's Strongest Man or World's Strongest Latino in July. I will be commentating at Colorado Strongest Man and Woman the weekend before the Shaw Classic, just outside of Colorado Springs at a brewery out there. So that show is really shaping up to be something great. The promoting forces, Brando Barrett and Barrett Strength, are really putting everything back into that show. And I will be commentating on the live stream there with my good old friends, ADL Live. It's going to be a blast, and that's the weekend before the Shaw Classic. I hope to be at the Shaw Classic to any sort of capacity. I know I am not there on the roster as an athlete. Whether that changes or not, I can not see a future where I am not part of that event to some capacity. So I look forward to sticking around in Colorado for that epic weekend of strength, the Shaw Classic afterwards. Next, the World Strength Games and American Deadlift Championships. I'm going to take a whack at breaking the American deadlift record. Jerry Pritchett's record has stood for far too long. I know I can take it. My goals and ambitions lie with taking the world record for the deadlift. So the American deadlift record is merely a stepping stone to get there. That'll be in September in Orlando. And then Giants Live announced me as a athlete on their tour of competitions for this year. I can only assume, because I am a affluent deadlifter, that that's going to mean the World Deadlift Championships at Giants Live Cardiff. We'll see. They haven't sent out any invites, and I love Giants Live. It felt like a family from the second I was getting there, and I'm hoping that, like some of the rest of the world, it seems they don't turn their back on me. So I really would love to go back to Giants Live, especially the World Deadlift Championships. That was a dream come true when I competed there back in 2021. So we'll see how that pans out. But just to give you an idea of what my upcoming schedule will be and where you can find me at. So hope to see you all there. It's always nice to meet friendly faces and listeners of the show whenever I do these events. All right, let's get into it. The realm of World's Strongest Man 2023. Before I talk about anything pertaining to myself, congratulations to Mitchell Hooper, the new World's Strongest Man. Recall, we had Mitchell Hooper last year on the show. We were recording from Loveland, Colorado, at the hotel for the Shaw Classic. Mitchell and I, we did a little podcast in his room. You can check out all that footage. It was probably not the best camera angle of the lighting, but I did a full episode with Mitch Hooper before he podiumed at the Shaw, and well before he was World's Strongest Man, but already making some waves in the sport. So a massive congratulations to the new world champion, Mitchell Hooper. He just earned it every turn, and what an absolute phenom. Mitchell, damn well done, man. If only we could all be like you. So, with Mitchell Hooper aside, and congratulations to all the other athletes and my friends out there who just poured their heart and soul to the competition, let's talk about me, because this is my show. On December 15th, no, not December 15th, December 5th, I received an email from the World's Strongest Man team telling me that I was a prospective athlete. A prospective athlete for the competition. It was a courtesy email that they said on their part to let me know the events, vaguely, of what we would be tested on at World's Strongest Man in 2023 so I could start training them. It was not an official invitation. They made sure to notate that on the email, but they reached out all the way in December, almost 6 months prior to World's Strongest Man, to tell me to hold that date and to prepare myself because the eyes were on me. Any guy who is vying to become the World's Strongest Man, if they get that email, they are going to make every conscientious effort to preserve the future in which they are contesting that title. I was going to make every effort. I made every effort to preserve my performance ability to compete there at World's Strongest Man in Myrtle Beach a month ago. But that was an email just to be a courtesy my way. It was not an official invite. So I want to start off by saying that all of the athletes that comprise the World's Strongest Man 2023 roster were undeniably worthy. Every man deserved to be there. And the thing about the 2022 competitive year is it was highly competitive, especially with the entire podium of official strongman games being invited to World's Strongest Man. That's huge. It is something that is long overdue, and I'm incredibly glad that it's happening. But it made for a very large pool of worthy athletes. So everyone who was on there deserved to be there. I don't want to take anything away from that. So know that I finished the 2022 season. The Shaw Classic was the last competition that I did. I finished that competition not feeling as if I was going to get invited to World's Strongest Man, especially World's Strongest Man 2022. I finished that, proud of what I did, but I knew that my performance was not enough on its own to constitute me getting back to World's Strongest Man. And if you recall one of the episodes that I did immediately after World's Strongest Man 2022, I had some disappointment and frustration off of the fact that I was in a very heated group. I had Brian Shaw, Mitch Hooper, Bobby Thompson, Constantine Ganasia, Mark Felix, all finalists with the exception of Mitch Hooper, who at the time I'm sure we could have guessed was going to blaze a hell of a future. But it was a tough group, and I wound up finishing that group tying with Constantine Ganasia. And that tiebreaker was broken on a technicality by who did better on the wrecking ball hold. So my frustration lied in the fact that despite how I felt about my performance, putting my heart and soul into everything, even with the knee injuries coming back on the car walk and the log press, I felt good that I left it all out there, but I felt bad in that the paper record was always going to show that I got sixth, dead last in my group. It doesn't reflect anything when you look at it just on those letters on paper. It doesn't reflect any of the contextual performances. It doesn't reflect how I kicked ass in the medley, the carry medley, the deadlift. But that's whatever. I knew that was not going to reflect well upon my actual ability. And it sucks that the pride that I feel about my performance in World's Strongest Man 2022 is going to be surmised as something that doesn't necessarily look prideful when it's read on paper. So I finished the season fully accepting the fact that I might not be invited to World's Strongest Man 2022. And that's fine. I knew that to myself. But World's Strongest Man sent me that email. They didn't need to. I have been at World's Strongest Man and had a presence there, been ready to just kick ass there with less than 2 months of a heads up. That first year, I got in with a month to prepare. And I'm fine with that. I would have been so much more okay if World's Strongest Man had not said a damn thing to me about being a prospective athlete. And this is perhaps the only thing that I feel negativity towards World's Strongest Man on. They sent a prospective notice to me only to string me along for 5 months and ultimately fall silent. When they sent me that email, like I said, I'm going to make every effort to preserve the future where I do compete there and to bring my best and strongest self, because the way I live my life is everything that I have done, I want to consecutively build upon. My performances at World's Strongest Man, my experiences at World's Strongest Man, I will only allow to get better from one year to the next. So finishing last year with where my placing was, I knew it was only going to be better this year. And I knew and I know I'm capable of making it to the finals. But World's Strongest Man did not need to send me that courtesy, quote unquote, email. They didn't. They hadn't done that before. And especially to do it 5 months out, like it just sucks. Like, save this date and work hard because we're watching you. But when the roster started being released, the initial wave of roster, and I wasn't on there, that's when the feelings started to come out that I wasn't worthy. I wasn't on this list. And World's Strongest Man stopped talking to me. If you're going to have the courtesy to tell me I may be a prospective competitor, string me along for all that time, and then just fall silent on me, not give me any reason as to why you didn't pick me, I would think that if you had the courtesy to at least reach out to me and tell me I was prospective, you would have the courtesy to tell me why I'm not there. Because now I'm left in the dark only to speculate. And did they not? I think that, one, I got last in my group last year, and someone probably made a blanket decision that they're not going to invite anyone who got last in their groups. Fine, so be it. I didn't compete enough last year. I did two main competitions, World's Strongest Man and the Shaw Classic last year. Two of the biggest competitions in the world. Two competitions where I feel like despite not placing highly or at the podium, I gave performances that proved my worthiness in being there at that stage. But maybe I didn't compete enough. The thing is that this past year, 2022, was my first year as a father. And life changes, people. You can be all sunshine and rainbows thinking everything's going to be the same. You're going to be able to push hard without, with the same carefree attitude as prior to having a kid. But life changes. And that was my first year of having a kid. So excuse me if I didn't compete as much as you want me to. I'm also left to speculate that they didn't invite me because I pulled out of Giants Live Cardiff last year. If you recall, I tore a hip muscle. One of my hip adductors I tore just mere weeks prior to Giants Live in Wales, the World Deadlift Championships. One of my dream competitions that absolutely destroyed me to have to pull out of. But I could not travel across the world with a torn hip and demand a max pull of myself. I knew it was going to be catastrophic. And I really hope that Giants Live does not hold that against me, because that is for the sake of preserving my health and my continued performance in this sport. But again, I'm left to speculate because no one told me a damn thing as to why I'm not there. The internet is full of plenty of negative assholes who have told me why I'm not there. And that has been a huge weight to sort of deal with. All the hate, all the negativity. And I'm left to speculate. The other thing that I have thought of is I was initially set to do Australia's Strongest International in early January of this year. But a trip to Australia is very expensive, and they were not providing travel. They were going to provide a very small amount of assistance. But as I was sitting on the precipice of that travel, I could not afford it. I could not afford it, so I could not get to Australia. And I only bring that up because World's Strongest Man took a sampling of some athletes who competed there at Australia's Strongest International. And I just think that that was held against me, that I didn't make it out there, and used as a metric to not have me invited to Worlds. But again, these are all things that I'm just left to speculate. No courtesy, the same courtesy that they showed me to send me that email initially, no courtesy to follow up with me and tell me why. I would think that at least for someone who had been at World's Strongest Man these past 3 years, that I would have earned a little bit more of that. So I'm not mad at World's Strongest Man for not inviting me. I want to make that very clear. I am irritated on how they went about this prospective email and then just falling silent. I get that they're a big company, that they have a lot of athletes, but throw me a freaking bone and at least tell me why I'm not there. That is the one reason why I'm mad at World's Strongest Man. So the mental health problems that started surfacing as the rosters were announced. Above all, I felt overlooked. Ever since I got that email in December, I was training hard. I was training the events. I was training things I don't like. Circus dumbbell being the big one on that one. I was working on week events like log press. I had even closed down my gym last year for the sake of being able to train hard, for the sake of being able to focus more on my pursuit of becoming the world's strongest man. I had made sacrifices all throughout my life to preserve my performance ability at World's Strongest Man 2023. I felt strong. I felt ready, but I never heard anything. At one point, I even made a post with me doing Fingal Fingers, and I directly told World's Strongest Man through the caption on that post that I wanted to come and play. I was training the events. I was feeling good. You're going to get a show out of me. Let me come play. That post got a lot of attention, but crickets from World's Strongest Man. Never heard a thing. As the roster continued to get released, more and more waves of athletes, and I wasn't on there. The hurt was really setting in. I hung on to a hope that I would make it in, even into the final months where there were only a couple spots left. On my end, remembering that my last performance in competition, the Shaw Classic, regardless of injuries holding me back on a few of the events, forget my crazy world record attempt going head-to-head with Novikov on that Hummer tire deadlift, but finishing off that contest, I was one of only a very few select athletes who finished that entire stone run. A stone run at what many revere as one of the heaviest contests in the world. And I completed it. I completed it well, and many of those guys didn't. And stones is a hallmark event of strongman. In World's Strongest Man, it comes down to that stone off for many athletes to get into the finals. And I am an athlete who just has good stones. So I hung on to hope that my performances, my track record were enough to at least make them remember or weigh me on the scale. And I'm sure they did weigh me on the scale compared to other guys, and I just was deemed ultimately unworthy. But in this process, I was constantly comparing myself to everyone on that roster and just ripping apart every aspect of me and my performance capability over and over and over again internally. That constant dissection of oneself, breaking myself down, trying to see what is wrong with me, what are the things that are making them not pick me, just destroying myself inside. It's terrible. It was terrible, and I was just left in the dark trying to guess, hoping that I would get in, feeling strong and ready to go, but giving no time of day in that regard. And then the Shaw Classic roster came out. I wasn't on it. Several people started reaching out to me that day when Brian posted the video saying the roster, or who the roster was, and asking me why I wasn't on it. I couldn't give them an answer. Honestly, this felt more painful than World's Strongest Man. I truly felt that regardless of the injuries holding back my performance at the Shaw, I poured my soul and everything into that event, and I feel like I proved myself. I feel like I proved myself in 2021. I feel like I proved myself in 2022. But that's me. My self-belief versus what and who Brian ultimately deems as worthy. And I will never hold that against him. I respect him wholly with every decision he's made. It was just one of those things where the way I felt about what I had done is not even close to how others feel about it. So that was a hard realization. But that one hurt. I really felt like the Shaw Classic was an arena where I not only had belonging, but I did prove myself in. Then on top of that, my dog died. Just the icing on the cake. My dog Nova, my half husky, half shepherd, my little boy. He wasn't even 6 years old. The thing about South Texas is it's getting really hot. And thinking back to my childhood, I can really feel how much the climate has changed. The summers have gotten so long and so hot, and the increasing heat and the changing weather patterns. There was a huge pest problem that we constantly tried to be on top of in our yard, and it seemed like fleas especially were hybridizing and becoming resistant to medications that we were spraying. And I don't know if it was that, but it was one of these things where from one day to the next, I walked outside to play with him and pet with him, and he was just completely down. And I just knew. I've been around enough dogs to where I knew that he didn't have much time left. But it happened so quickly, like from one day to the next. And I won't go into how that whole death went down, but he did die in my arms, and he was very young, and I had so much more of a future and things we were going to do with him, him being with my daughter, us moving to the mountains and living there. But he died way too young. His sister Nymeria lives on, but Nova was gone. And this was very much the icing on the cake emotionally, what really just like, of course, emphasizing the temporality of life, but just so much negativity. And like, why does all this other shit matter when the beings that I love can be gone so quickly? Why waste my time on trifle things when, I don't know. This started stimulating some thoughts down that path. So that was another thing to add on top of the emotional mess inside my head. And it destroyed me. It really did. Another big component to some of the mental anguish and hurt that I felt surrounding this whole thing is friendships in the sport. I have made what feels like several lifelong friendships with many of the guys who are at the top level of the sport, especially the Americans. Trey, Kevin, Evan, Bobby, and so many more, you know. And the only times that I get to see these guys is when we're in competition. We all live our own lives outside of Strongman. Getting together mainly is only able to happen at and because of competition. It's hard to coordinate life around everything else that goes on, especially with all of us pursuing Strongman so intensely. So not being invited to shows also carries the weight of not getting to see the people that I love and care deeply about. And it hurts. It leaves me with major feelings of being left out. And that just adds a whole nother component to it, because I sit here watching World's Strongest Man go on, knowing what those experiences are like from being on that side of the table, but also seeing all my friends there and knowing I'm not with them, knowing I don't know when I'm going to see them next. And it just sucks. It's that whole like didn't get invited to the party type feeling. So the realities of all of this is a really big one. The world has yet to ever see a full health Gabe perform at these high stages. Every contest since my last Arnold Amateur World Championships in early 2020, I've been hampered by injury. You think of my World's Strongest Man debut later that year, I got pulled out because my heart started skipping freaking beats. And then 2021, my knee injuries, the torn meniscus in my leg. Of course, I tore my hip in 2022. Every pro performance I've had, I've been held back by injury. And yet I've still done some pretty incredible things. I pulled 1,000 pounds in Manchester in front of thousands of people, injured. I can go on and on about the things that I've done while injured, but I have definitely proved myself that despite having debilitating injuries holding me back, I can leave my mark and be a highly competitive athlete. Imagine what that Gabe would be that is fully healthy. That is a force to be reckoned with, and one that is surely capable of making the finals at the world's strongest stage. I feel great now. Like I said at the start of this episode, all the injuries are behind me, and that's why this sucks even more, is I feel so good. I feel strong. I feel able. And yet I'm unable to use it. But this also gives a huge weight on me that I want to preserve feeling this well, feeling this good, feeling this capable. So the other realities, besides the world never seeing a fully fit Gabe, is World's Strongest Man, Brian, ultimately deemed me unworthy of being at these stages. Accepting and coming to terms with this single truth is what has been at the core of my mental strife. Accepting that I have invested a decade in walking this path, and then it can feel like it is all ripped away in the blink of an eye, only to have to reprove myself all over again. I feel like I spent, the second I turned pro, and even before I turned pro, I spent all that time proving myself worthy. And I got to those stages. I got to them repeatedly. The world was seeing me for what I was capable of. But now I'm at a point where I'm having to reprove myself all over again. The world has forgotten those reasons why they were attracted to me and my performances. And now it's getting back to like, let me have to re-show them why. And I it's self-belief has gotten me this far already. Self-belief has been the main driving force. My belief in knowing that I have what it takes to become the world's strongest man. But self-belief, although it means everything to me, it means nothing in the minds of these forces filling competition rosters. And it's tough to deal with that because I feel so strongly, so confident about what I can do, and that means nothing to other people. I have been having real problems accepting that I have invested so much time into climbing higher and higher and higher in this sport, yet I can be pulled back down so quickly and without any regard. If I think of any of my pursuits in life, they are meant to be constructive, ever improving, no steps backwards. So this doesn't sit right. And I start questioning whether I could be better using my life, knowing that I've done something for so long and now I'm pulled back and have to, let's just talk about the simple scheme of like, if I wanted to be back at World's Strongest Man, it's not going to be until 2024. And every year is precious. Hell, you're talking to, you're not talking to me, I'm talking to you, but I am an athlete who has already had heart problems before as something that pulled me out of a competition. I've lost my father. I've lost people. I've seen how the body can give up when pursuing ultimate strength. And I care so much about my life that I don't want to waste time. Every day is precious. And if just the whole idea of reprove myself, it's like, I don't know if I want to go back through that again, just because I don't know if the time resource is worth it in my mind. So in my mind, this gets to where I'm at right now. If you're following me on Instagram current day, then you will have seen how earlier this particular week I put out some story posts where I was walking with my daughter and my dog Nymeria out in one of our favorite wilderness destinations here in South Texas. And I said, I'm feeling burnt out. I don't know what the future holds, but I've spent all the past 6 months working hard to be ready to compete at a stage that I didn't get invited to. I don't really care about being World's Strongest Man as much anymore. Or at least I don't care about it as much as some of the other things in my life, comparatively. The reality is that when Xiomara, my daughter, came into this world, that all changed. It all changed. And I may not have known it or been able to accept it then, but I fully accept it now, is I will not push hard enough in my current pursuits to jeopardize any sort of future that I have with my daughter. So let me kind of delve on that a little bit more. I'm going to describe to you a hypothetical scenario where I make it to the World's Strongest Man final. You got Tom Stoltman, Alexei Novikov, Trey Mitchell, Evan Singleton, Bobby, whoever else is there. We're on those last final events, and it comes down to who is willing to push their body so hard that they might break it to secure that win. I fundamentally would not allow myself to push that hard to where I knew I was going to break my body. And I can't say the same about some of these other guys. I know these guys. I know how bad they want this. And I know that if they can win at the cost of breaking their body, they'll do it. They will do it. I get it. I respect it. But that's not me. I cannot push that. I know that I would never allow myself to push that hard. And this is where I can say that becoming World's Strongest Man doesn't mean as much as it used to, because there was a time where I would have pushed that hard. The time is not anymore. There are things I want more in my life. At the top of that list is to be a great dad, to be a great husband. Bianca, my wife, and Xiomara, my daughter, are my world. There's no world, in my opinion, without them. There is a world without Strongman. There's not a world without my daughter and my wife. So that is at the top of my list. Quality of life is something that I want too. No injuries. I know saying no injuries as a strongman is ridiculous. You're going to get hurt and banged up along the way. But even if I tore a bicep and I couldn't hold my daughter, or if I jacked up my knee again, I couldn't go on long walks with her or long hikes. This is quality of life stuff. These are things that mean a lot to me, and I would lose those in having that injury. I want to be able to focus on more passions that I have outside of the sport. There are things that I love in my life, with nature and adventuring being at the core of those things. I love drones. I love photography. I love science. I love space. Like, I love getting to use my voice. And I would like to be able to focus more on those. The ability to invest my full attention into everything, not making significant sacrifices or shaping each and every day for the sake of strongman or training. And this can go all the way down to simple interactions, even with family, like skipping out on certain family parties or going to hang out with certain friends for the sake of making sure I get that training in. You know, I want to be able to not have to make those sacrifices anymore. I want to be present in the moment, for every moment. I don't want to miss a thing, especially with my wife and my daughter. My daughter is now 14 months old. You know, thinking back on this whole year, like it's her whole first year. Of course, it's been like her little larval state at first, but now she's walking around, running. She's got a full-blown personality. She's a climber. She's discovering so much more ability and ways to interact with this world, so many curiosities. And I want to be there for every moment, fully invested in it. I don't want to miss a damn thing. And that's hard to do as someone who's fully invested in becoming the world's strongest man. Because if you're going to be truly the best in the world, you have to do more, or at least do it better than your counterpart on the other side of the world who's working just as hard at that ambition. Longevity and health is something I want. I don't want to die early. And I've had real good grasps of what it means and how the life can be cut early. Even going back to that World's Strongest Man 2020 where I had the atrial fibrillation. You know, I don't want my heart to give out on me. I want to be here well into my old years. I want to be here to see the amazing woman that my daughter is going to become and how she will change the world. I want health. I want a long and I want an able life. I want to be able to run, walk, jump, swim, climb, hike. I want to do all of that. And some of those things are not so easy to hold on to when you're pushing and redlining to become the world's strongest man. Not having to force feed or be extra heavy. I told you I'm loving this lighter body weight that I'm at. Not having to run my day militantly around an eating schedule would be nice. And, you know, I don't want to go into this one too heavily because it's all speculative. But not having or feeling pressured to use PEDs. I've been very open that I've been on testosterone replacement therapy since even before I started competing. And I feel totally fine and great with just that. But in this sport, especially in competing to that highest level, there's pressure to do more. And I don't want to feel like being at 100% already is not enough. I don't want to feel like I would have to make decisions to put chemicals in my body that might take away years of my life. You know, I don't feel like I would need to, but I don't even want to be surrounded by that pressure. Because again, if you're going to be the best in the world, you got to be better than your counterpart on the other side who's working just as hard as you. So these are the things that I want more than being the world's strongest man. I still want to be the world's strongest man. I just don't want it as much. It doesn't mean as much to me to where I will cater every single aspect of my life, because up until this point, the past 10 years, I have been framing each and every single day, each and every single interaction around the goal and the mission of becoming the world's strongest man. But strongman, as of lately, has been more of a net negative in my life than a positive. I haven't been having fun with it. And that's as a competitor trying to become the world's strongest man. As a competitor, it has been a negative in my life lately, not a positive. I have lost the fun. I have lost the enjoyment. I have lost the allure. But there are so many more ways that I have discovered I can stay involved and feel fulfilled by this sport. So many more ways other than actively competing in it. Putting on competitions, commentary, judging, promotion, whatever it is. Even this podcast. There's so many ways that I can still have an even greater, more prolific impact on the sport than being an active competitor. And these are the realizations I'm starting to feel and acknowledge. And ultimately, I know that in my heart, if I decided to hang up the towel and retire, then I have left my mark. I have accomplished great things. I've experienced things that the younger me would not even believe. I've experienced and achieved things that people could never even dream to do in an entire lifetime. I could hang up the towel happily and retire if I wanted to, knowing fully that I have left my mark and I have achieved greatness. It doesn't matter what anyone else says or thinks. That's what I know and feel in my heart. So I'm not retiring. I'm not giving up. I'm not hanging up the towel. I still plan on competing. I have major deadlift goals this year, and I still want the deadlift world record. I may not want to be the world's strongest man as much anymore. I still do, not as much, but I do know I can get that deadlift world record. I'm still trying. I'm still working hard at that. That doesn't change. It may simply just be time that Strongman moves away and out of the driving seat of this vehicle. Not out of the vehicle completely, just no longer driving and making every decision. It's time to let other forces take the helm of this ship. We'll see what the future holds. I'm still training. I love being a strong man. I will always be a strong man. I love being strong. This sport has given me so much, and I'm for sure not done with it. I'm just recalibrating my focuses and acknowledging that the things I want out of my life supersede the narrow scope of being the world's strongest man. And that's where I'm at right now. I don't know what the future holds. Just know that I'm still here. Texas Titan isn't going anywhere. I'm still ever hungry, and I'm still going to be pushing towards greatness. It just might not be in the same way that I was doing before. Now, this is something that I was kind of I didn't know if I wanted to do it, but I have a special place in my heart for people who have mental health struggles, or people who face the challenges of what competing in this sport can bring mentally. And in the scope of the past 3 months, or past 6 months especially, but there have been some real haters on the internet. There have been some real negative people. And this, I feel like if you don't have anything nice to say, then don't say it at all. Why come out of the woodwork and make yourself heard for something completely negative, especially when it's not welcome? So, if you have any Game of Thrones fans out there in the audience, you'll remember that Arya Stark has a list of names that she would recite every night before bed. Although she had a different intent with those lists of names, I don't wish nearly anything as malicious as her. I do have what I will call an FU list of people who I will never forget have been negative to me in this last month. And this is not classy of me, but I don't care. I'm going to call these bastards out. One of them is Luke Meredith. Apparently, he's a competitive middleweight pro from somewhere in the United States. Don't really care. But he's a negative asshole that came out of the woodwork. And I really hope I don't see him in person ever, because I'm not going to be pleasant to him. He's one person I don't even know the guy. I know what he looks like now. I know his name. but he's one guy on my FU list. And a bigger person on my FU list is some guy named Jacob Curry. Jacob Curry decided to chime in very unwelcomely on a post that was clearly about mental health and bring all sorts of negativity. If anyone is going through mental health struggles, you don't beat down on them for it. You either uplift them or you keep your tongue held shut and silent. But Jacob Curry did not. He wanted to chime in on a post that I clearly made about mental health. And so now he's on my shit list. Now he's on my FU list. I hope I don't see him in person, because that will not be a pleasant interaction. But there have been people who have been on this FU list of names that I will recite every day before bed. I won't recite them. I'm giving them way too much as it is by giving their names on this Titan Talk. But there is no place for people bullying people for mental health struggles. I've said that before. I will say it again. No one deserves that. And these two guys are on my FU list. But on that note, I want you all to know that I feel great. I'm very happy. Regardless of this stuff, when we got within 2 weeks of World's Strongest Man, I completely shrugged off the hope that I was going to be there. And I got to a point even where it was like, if they tell me that I'm invited, I'm not going to accept it. They're not going to string me along all the way to here and then me just be like, okay, I've been waiting this time. Thanks. 2 weeks. Here we go. No. There was a point where I just gave up on it, shrugged it off, and I immediately felt a relief. Pressure was lifted. I started having fun with training again. And I feel really good right now. And I want to preserve that. Whenever I get to points in my life where I have to really reflect on things, take pause, I like to get out in nature and recalibrate. And although I did that earlier this week with my daughter and my dog to think about things, my wife and I have been planning and have been putting off going on a nice trip for a while. We went to Big Bend earlier this year, but we hadn't really traveled since both OSG to the east and then the Shaw Classic last year out west and north. So we're going to go to Utah. We're going to head out there starting tomorrow on Sunday, get up to the mountains, spend some time in the desert, spend some time out in nature, and just really recalibrate. My soul belongs out in the mountains, and I'm very much looking forward to that and coming back supercharged. And I will try to keep Titan Talk on a more regular schedule. I really like the idea of pumping out a new episode at least twice a month. So I do apologize for the lapse. Just know that I have been hurting. I have been hurting for a while, and with a mind frame or a mind space that was ever changing, ever evolving, I could not bring myself to this microphone and give you all the coherent, level-headed and sound thoughts that you deserve to hear, because it's been a roller coaster of emotions. But I do want to say that I am so grateful, thankful, proud, happy, just feeling very loved by all the outpouring of support that I have from you all, whether you're listeners of the show or friends, fans that I've met along the way. I've been in some dark places, and your comments, your messages, your concerns have all really touched my heart, and nothing but the biggest love to all you all. Gran amor para todos. Muchas gracias. Let's space out. Something massive recently happened, and I got to be a part of it. Maybe not directly a part of it, but I got to experience it in person. We had the first ever integrated Starship launch from right here in my backyard in South Texas. It was the first time that Starship was stacked on top of the Super Heavy booster for an orbital flight test. The most powerful launch vehicle in history. 400 feet tall, 5,000 tons or 11 million pounds of spaceship. This thing is bigger than most skyscrapers. And I got to watch it in person. I got to feel it in person. The initial launch was set for April 17th, a Monday morning, clear skies, perfect conditions. We got out there to Port Isabel, watching it from there. You know, we were about 5 miles away from the launch site. We could clearly see Starship out in the distance. It was a still morning. It was perfect conditions. However, when it got time to the launch countdown, when it got to about 8 minutes from launch, there was a pressurization valve issue on their fuel tanks, and they had to scrub the launch, and they did it as a final wet dress rehearsal. 3 days later, on 4/20, that's when the next launch was set to happen. So it brought a whole new meaning to getting lifted on 4/20 when you have the world's strongest and most powerful rocket ready to take off. Now, on that morning, on that Thursday morning, there was not as clear of a sky. It was a little bit hazy, a little bit overcast. There were clouds there, but I got to the viewing spot that I had picked. I took my youngest brother, Esteban, and my daughter, Xiomara, with me to go watch it, and we could see Starship out there right across the bay, 5 miles away. Watching the countdown, everything was going great. We were in a crowd of probably close to about 150 people, and we got within that. We passed the 10-minute mark. We got to T-minus 1 minute. I do remember the flight director called a hold at 40 seconds, and that hold lasted about 3 minutes. But then, in the blink of an eye, we just saw the flames shoot out the bottom of Starship and this massive plume of dust be blown around in each direction from it. And the thing got airborne. It cleared the launch pad. And it's crazy. With it being 5 miles away, there's that slight delay from seeing the flames and then hearing them. And the power and the sound as the rocket was on the pad, and, you know, just clearing that initial 400 feet of launch pad, it was loud as hell, and I could feel every bone in my body rattling and vibrating with the booms of those 33 engines. And when it got higher than the pad, that's when the real noise started happening, because it was now sound was projecting in 360 degrees unobstructed, and it got louder. The rumbling, just, that's what I went for. I wanted to feel this rocket, this most powerful rocket that has ever been built. And there was a time where I had to, you know, cup my daughter's ear close to me. I forgot her headphones. In all the craziness, I forgot her headphones, but it was great for her to experience it too. I cupped her against my head, covering her ears, and we just watched it. And she looked up in awe, knowing that she was in a crowd of people that were all watching the same thing. And it was incredible, so powerful. And that massive skyscraper-sized rocket got airborne right before our eyes with a storm of fire spewing out from the engines beneath it. The rocket went up all the way to the sky. In about 2 minutes, it had ascended 40 kilometers, so about 24 miles in 2 minutes. Think about somewhere 24 miles away or 40 kilometers away and clearing that distance in 2 minutes. That's fast. That's fast for a 5,000-ton vehicle to climb directly upward. And that's one of the things I remember most about that launch, was how quick it was over, how quick that the rocket escaped or got out of our field of view. We probably got to see it for maybe about 3 miles until it disappeared beyond the clouds and we couldn't see it anymore. Still got to follow it on the live stream as we were watching there on site, but it accelerated so fast. And this thing, the shots that you see, it's such a big object moving that it looks slow. But in real life, that thing just up and got out of our view so quick. But I remember as it got to that 40 kilometers high mark, this was where the stage separation was supposed to occur, where the Starship spaceship on top of the Super Heavy booster were supposed to separate. Starship would continue into orbit, and Super Heavy would go back down for a splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico. But at stage separation, the rocket did not unlock. You know, there were clearly some things that were happening, some anomalies that were happening where it wasn't going as it should have. So there was a flip turn maneuver that was supposed to happen where the rocket would flip, the ship would go one way, and the booster would go down. One flip happened, another flip happened. The rocket was tumbling, flipping in midair, 400 feet of just vertical ship tumbling. And I even heard the guy on the announcer on the live stream like, and here we have Starship doing the flip turn maneuver and is doing it over and over again. This is clearly an anomaly and things are not going nominally, something like that. Very eloquently put. And after a couple of turns, the rocket detonates and explodes in what they call an RUD, a rapid unscheduled disassembly. The flight termination system was activated, and they detonated the rocket for the sake of, exploding it before it could come down on anything important, which was not much of a concern. The rocket was already well over the Gulf, and any fallout would have occurred on the Gulf itself. But the robustness of the rocket, flipping and tumbling even as it was still doing Mach 2, it did not let go. And to see something so rigid, it was a very robust and well-built rocket in terms of durability, and that was pretty cool. But it was over very quick. And one other thing that I remember is after the rocket blew up, we started walking back to the car and getting ready. Maybe 10 minutes had elapsed from the initial launch. We were sitting at a turn signal ready to start heading west back home, and it looked like it started raining. But the rain was hitting the windshield in a very weird way, to where after it stopped, I put on my windshield wipers, and it was very clearly sand. A whole bunch of particulate sand from the launch pad 5 miles away had gotten blown up in the air, traveled all that distance, and rained down on the city of Port Isabel. Not a crazy amount, but definitely a good amount of debris to where I'm glad we were in the car and not outside, because we would have been very itchy the whole way home. But it was crazy to experience that. I remember getting back home, even after traveling a whole hour from Port Isabel back to my home in Edinburgh. It looked like we had just driven through Egypt in a sandstorm. The Subaru was covered in sand. But the Elon Musk had even said very early on that as long as the rocket clears the launch pad, it's a success. And it was a huge success. The whole point of this launch was to test the integration of both components of the ship, to launch the vehicle and see how different aspects of its performance during that initial ascent went, especially a phase that's called max Q. It is the highest point of stress on the vehicle as it achieves its highest velocity going through the atmosphere. And the ship performed great through that. There might have been shortcomings along the way, but this was a huge success on being able to determine the performance of the vehicle. So what happened in the days immediately after Starship launch? Well, you have the media, first of all, trying to paint a picture of failure, that Elon Musk's massive Starship blows up just minutes after launch. Well, yeah, it did, but there was so much success and takeaway from this. So that was kind of shitty, like seeing how the media wanted to paint this in a bad light, because it was a huge monumental day for humanity. This ship will carry humans back to the moon. Remember, SpaceX has a $3 billion contract with NASA for the Artemis missions, especially Artemis 3 and 4, which will get humans back to the moon. And then eventually, Starship will take us to Mars and beyond. So you think of what the Falcon 9 rockets are doing now. Their constant launches and relandings. There was a time when the Falcon 9 rockets were trying to land themselves, where it was just explosion after explosion, and now it's a well-oiled machine. And their Starship will be like that. It's just going to take a couple of these tests of trial and error and perfecting the vehicle. But there was a lot of damage to the pad. The strongest launch vehicle to ever be built, 33 of these engines created a lot of power, and essentially that thrust shattered the concrete beneath the launch pad. And the obliteration of that concrete added to that dust tornado, if you will, where it sent particulate all the way up in the air along with sand from the surrounding area, that there was a lot of damage to the launch pad. We saw some pictures of, lots of chunks of concrete on the beach forming big craters, immediately right there next to the launch pad. You see some, chunks missing from the launch pad itself, some rebar sticking out everywhere. The launch pad was very much still standing, but there was damage to it. And of course, anytime there's a rapid unscheduled disassembly, an explosion of the rocket, there's going to be an FAA investigation as to how everything went down, any safety measures, the flight termination systems, and the effect of how this could happen, the effect it could possibly have on the public. So there's an FAA investigation. Starship is grounded right now due to that ongoing investigation. But we did recently receive some updates from Elon Musk directly on this launch. And I quote him, "Basically, the outcome was roughly sort of what I expected and maybe slightly exceeded my expectations. I'm glad to report that the pad damage is actually quite small, and it looks like it can be repaired quite quickly. It was actually just good to get this vehicle off the ground because we've made so many improvements in Booster 9 and beyond." Booster 9 being the next Super Heavy that is ready for the next Starship launch. So we saw through some of that coverage that as Starship climbed, some of those camera angles could show that engines were out. Out of the array of the 33 engines there at the bottom of Super Heavy, some of those engines were out. 3 of the engines did not ignite from the get-go due to their flight software deeming them unhealthy enough to achieve full thrust. So that left 30 engines, which is the minimal needed for liftoff. The 3 engines that did not ignite were not damaged by gravel or the rock tornado that came up from the launch pad. And we could see in some of those shots in the footage of that initial liftoff from the launch pad that there were some big booms that sent big chunks of rock flying everywhere. But there's no evidence that any of that is what damaged these engines. At T plus 27 seconds after takeoff, engine number 19 lost communication. And some sort of what they're calling an energetic event knocked out the heat shields of engine 19 and 3 other engines surrounding that specific engine. So now this is 7 engines that are out. But the rocket kept going. So, and of course, they say energetic event. I assume that is just an elegant way of explosion. They don't know why, but it was an energetic event. But that one engine losing communication kind of triggered a cascade effect on 3 of the surrounding engines going out too. At T plus 85 seconds after takeoff, the rocket started to lose its thrust vector control. Thrust vector control, you see the word vector, you think of angles. The ability of these engines to sort of gimbal back and forth and steer the ship along with its grid fins halfway up as well. But the loss of its thrust vector control, its steering, led to the initiation of the flight termination system, the big red button that they push when they decide it's time to blow up the ship. Big problem here, though, was that there was about a 40-second delay between the initiation of that flight termination system and the rocket actually breaking apart. So there were, first of all, no safety issues in that regard with the rocket being so far offshore already. But the flight termination system is their fail-safe. This is what preserves safety for those on the ground should things go fully awry. So this is probably going to be the longest lead item in terms of getting ready for the next Starship launch, is the requalification of this flight termination system and SpaceX proving to the FAA that when they push the button, if they need to, that the ship will blow up, that there's no delay. So there's also plans to harden the launch site. Elon Musk refers to a mega steel pancake of a disk that they are building to put beneath the launch pad. Originally, this was supposed to be there for the first launch, but their calculations initially had said that they were going to be okay, but could not foresee how much the thrust was going to shatter the concrete beneath the launch pad. So this mega steel pancake will go right underneath the rocket. It'll provide strength to the structure and also will pump water upwards, creating a regenerative cooling system to dampen the exhaust of those 33 engines aboard Super Heavy. So I quote Elon here. That is basically a water-jacketed sandwich that's 2 layers of plate steel that are also perforated on the upper side. Basically a massive, super strong steel shower head pointing upwards. And I mean, that is clearly going to be better than just a concrete base, especially. It's going to diffuse the heat. It's going to make for some strong integrity with that launch pad beneath. But it will also reduce any fallout or that human-made sandstorm. If the vehicle had not lost its thrust vector control, it may very well have made it to stage separation. The Starship would have broken off from the rocket itself. So that inability for them to separate and that loss of that thrust vector control, there have already been changes made to the next booster, booster number 9, to ensure that the rocket is able to continue to steer itself, even if there are multiple engine failures. And again, this has already been built. Booster 9 is built and fully assembled, ready to go. Booster 9 has electrically steering motors rather than hydraulic actuators. So the way that they steer each individual engine is now going to be governed by electricity versus hydraulics. And I'm not very well versed on electricity versus hydraulics, but the main thing here is that having an electric control is going to be more isolated than hydraulic, because it's all circuitry and it's individual circuits that can be turned on or off. But a hydraulic control would have a shared activation component between those engines. So if something goes wrong with the hydraulic system as a whole, it's going to affect all those engines. Whereas electric control, if something goes wrong with one specifically, it's an isolated event. And you're not going to have that thing where you had like engine 19 blowing out and then blowing out the 3 other engines around it in an energetic event. So that's a key feature that is going to ensure that the rocket can continue to steer itself. And it's pretty cool knowing that Booster 9 is already built and ready to go. But that's why this first go with the expendable boosters, the prototypes, this is why you have expendable boosters, is to kind of be able to have these not mistakes, but these opportunities to learn from, if you will. So where does that put us at for the future? Musk says that Starship would be ready to launch in another 6 to 8 weeks. That's not a long time. He does say that the pad damage is pretty minimal and could be fixed rapidly. But closing out work with the FAA may take longer. The investigation, the safety concerns that it poses to the environment and the surrounding area of towns and beachfront, and of course the new launch license. You remember that this recent launch, the holdup was all due to SpaceX getting that launch license from the FAA. So we'll see how long that whole process takes. The one thing that I can say from the optimistic front is that SpaceX is working closely with NASA, because NASA needs them for the Artemis missions to get humans back to the moon. To quote Musk again, I think this time we've got better than a 50% chance of reaching orbit. I'm hopeful we can get 4 flights out this year, maybe 5. Musk estimated that SpaceX will spend about $2 billion on the Starship program in this year, 2023. And he does not anticipate that he is needing to raise any additional capital. So SpaceX is set to keep these things going and to keep moving forward. The company has already booked private trips to the moon. You know, several celebrities, artists, well-known influencers, if you will, have already booked flights aboard Starship for a lunar go-around. And a lot of that money and, you know, other money that the company makes is what is generating the capital to keep funding this program. But there will be a time where I believe Elon says he thinks Starship launches could get down to $2 million per launch, which is in the grand scheme of rocket launches, very cheap. So I'm excited. It was a hell of an event and just incredible to be there with my daughter, my youngest brother, to feel the power of the rocket and to see before my eyes in our very own backyard here in South Texas the next phase of human space flight and exploration. I get so excited. I cannot wait for the next one. But it's good to be back on the air with you all. I hope to be on it more. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not retiring. I am just changing the frame of mind in which I approach these strength pursuits. So, an ever-evolving path, right? An ever-evolving path, ever-changing. Life is a beautiful journey filled with ups and downs and winding roads. It's just one of those things where you just live for the sake of living. To all of you, my friends out there, keep wayfaring this universe of power with a full heart, a strong mind, and a yearning to live for the sake of living. For this life is a beautiful one. Until the next time, this has been Titan Talk. Take care.